Teaching the Great Gatsby for the AP Lit exam can feel far more overwhelming than it needs to be, and preparing to take that exam can feel equally stressful. I know teachers often feel pressure to align instruction to a rubric that can seem very opaque, and students frequently walk into the test understanding the novel but not understanding what the exam is actually asking them to do, which leaves them at a real disadvantage. My name is Dr. Whitney Kosters, and I have been teaching literature and writing for over 20 years, and I serve as a reader for the AP Lit exam as well. So I have sat at the scoring table reading hundreds of timed essays. I have taught Gatsby in my own lit courses, and I remember taking this exam myself many years ago. So I understand the frustration, the bewilderment, and the disproportionate stress that so often surround this test. That is why I built two guides, one that specifically teaches instructors how to prepare their students for the exam and includes the student packet, and one for students to review independently and prepare strategically. So I created these guides specifically to help you. I kept seeing the same disconnect over and over. Unfortunately, effort does not always translate into results on the AP Lit exam, not because students are incapable or because teachers are unprepared, but because the skill being measured is often misunderstood by both parties. If you're a teacher, your students probably understand the novel. They likely participate in discussions thoughtfully, identify symbolism accurately, speak confidently about the American dream, and write essays that sound intelligent and organized. And yet, many of them will still plateau on the exam. From the scoring table, it becomes clear within the first paragraph whether a student has been trained in commentary or trained in summary, because the distinction is obvious once you understand what the rubric is actually rewarding. What I see constantly are statements like, "the green light symbolizes hope," or "Gatsby represents the American dream," or "Nick is an unreliable narrator." None of those claims are incorrect, but they signal a ceiling. They reveal that the student has identified an idea and stopped there, rather than explaining how Fitzgerald constructs meaning through language, structure, and narrative positioning. The exam rewards controlled explanation of construction, not mere identification. When readers score essays, they are trained not to ask whether a student found the symbol, but whether the student explained what Fitzgerald's choices do to reader judgment, emotional pressure, ethical tension, and instability within the passage itself. So consider the final line of the novel. "So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past." A mid-range essay will say that this shows people cannot escape the past, but a higher scoring essay will track how the syntax moves forward and backward simultaneously, how beat on implies exertion against resistance, how borne back introduces passivity, and how the rhythm itself enacts the tension between aspiration and regression. It's going to argue that Fitzgerald constructs longing as structurally self-defeating because the dream depends on distance and illusion in order to survive. That movement from naming meaning to explaining how meaning is built doesn't develop accidentally through discussion alone. It's trained deliberately, under constraint, through repetition and revision. This system is unapologetically rigorous. It doesn't function as a summary packet, a collection of themes, or a set of model essays to imitate. It's designed to train students in analytical precision. So let me show you more concretely what this looks like. Take the shirt scene in Chapter 5. Many students write that Daisy cries because she regrets losing Gatsby. That interpretation captures surface emotion, but it doesn't interrogate structure. Students are required to separate attraction from endorsement and to expose the moral cost beneath spectacle. They isolate Fitzgerald's accumulation of color and fabric, examine how Daisy's response is tied to material excess, and then build commentary under enforced constraints, one device per quote, one quote per scene, with no substitutions later. Students move from statements like "Daisy regrets the past" to something more controlled and defensible. By linking Daisy's tears to the spectacle of Gatsby's wealth, Fitzgerald exposes how desire is inseparable from status performance, suggesting that nostalgia in the novel depends less on lost intimacy and more on the insulation money promises. Now, that sentence earns points because it explains function, not because it names a feeling. Another core feature in my guide is what I call the judgment tracker. Now, the judgment tracker is a structural, analytical chart students use while reading. In one column, they record the specific language that invites a reader to form a judgment about a character, value, or event. In the next column, they articulate the provisional judgment this language creates. As the novel progresses, they return to earlier entries and revise those judgments when later language complicates or destabilizes them. For example, when Nick describes himself as someone who reserves all judgments, students document the phrasing that positions him as morally reflective. Later, when his narration reveals bias or selective sympathy, they revise the earlier judgment to account for that tension. A judgment that never shifts signals insufficient analysis. Meaning emerges from watching how language revises reader perception over time, not from attaching a static label like unreliable or reliable. Now, the structure also enforces restraint in argument construction. When students prepare an FRQ3 essay, they are limited to 3 scenes, 1 quote per scene, and 1 device per quote, with no substitutions once selected. This constraint prevents accumulation and forces leverage. If evidence only supports a claim and doesn't complicate it, it's rejected because strong arguments are built on control and not abundance. There's also a built-in diagnostic and revision routine aligned directly to the rubric. After every practice FRQ, students underline the thesis that earns row A, bracket sentences that earn row B, and star sentences that sustain contradiction for row C. If a checklist reveals that commentary explains what something means but not what it does, then students return to the relevant module and redo the analytical move before revisiting the essay. They are not allowed to compensate with length, additional quotations, or decorative language. They must repair the specific reasoning failure. Now, that kind of disciplined revision changes scores because it changes their habits. For teachers, this means you're not guessing why essays plateau. You have an operational system that translates the rubric into visible thinking moves and grade. For teachers, this means you're not guessing why essays plateau. You have an operational system that translates the rubric into visual thinking moves, and grading becomes diagnostic rather than subjective. It also protects rigor when schedules shift because the pacing guide identifies which modules establish analytical habits and cannot be compressed without damaging depth. And for students, this means you're not practicing blindly or hoping improvement will occur through repetition alone. You're actually learning to explain what language does, to revise judgments under pressure, to sustain contradiction deliberately, and to transfer the method to unfamiliar passages. Now, the stress of the exam decreases significantly when you understand how it's scored and how to prepare for it strategically. This framework aligns directly with FRQ2 prose analysis and row C sophistication, but the reasoning it teaches strengthens literary writing in any classroom. Honors classes, general English courses, and college survey courses benefit from the same disciplined analytical habit. Students are trained to track judgments, resist simplification, and build arguments about meaning rather than theme. Please know that I have built similar AP-aligned systems for Frankenstein, for short fiction, and for additional core texts, all grounded in the same interpretive structure. The consistency is intentional because skill develops through repetition of disciplined method rather than exposure to disconnected activities. This lecture models part of that reasoning. The materials make it systematic, enforceable, and transferable. So if you're teaching Gatsby this semester, this is the moment to align instruction with how the exam is actually scored before habits of summary solidify. And if you're preparing for the AP Lit exam yourself, this gives you controlled training in the reasoning the scoring process rewards. Everything is linked below, and as always, thank you so much for joining me here today, and please add me here on YouTube or TikTok so that you have another resource on hand as I have a full library of lectures on writing, research, rhetoric, and more. Be well.